Backing away from the brink of war, President Trump appeared to seek a de-escalation with Iran following a missile attack on U.S. targets in Iraq. But Trump is also vowing to keep the pressure up, promising new sanctions.
Plus, two Republican lawmakers slammed the Trump administration's classified briefing on last week's killings of Iran's top general. Senator Mike Lee of Utah called it insulting and demeaning.
And a surprise announcement from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They say they're stepping back as senior members of the royal family. Good Thursday morning, everybody. It is January 9th. I'm Yasmin Vestugian alongside Ayman Mohadeen. We begin with President Trump backing away from the brink of war with Iran, saying he will respond to Tehran targeting U.S. forces in Iraq with economic sanctions and not military force. First reported by the Washington Post, a senior administration official confirming to NBC News that when it became clear Tuesday night that there were no casualties, the president told his top advisors in the Situation Room that he did not want to escalate the crisis.
I'm pleased to inform you the American people should be extremely grateful and happy. No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. We suffered no casualties. All of our soldiers are safe. Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned. Nations have tolerated Iran's destructive and destabilizing behavior in the Middle East and beyond. Those days are over. Iran has been the leading sponsor of terrorism, and their pursuit of nuclear weapons threatens the civilized world. We will never let that happen. As we continue to evaluate options in response to Iranian aggression, the United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime. These powerful sanctions will remain until Iran changes its behavior.
The Pentagon also disputing claims that Iran intended to avoid American casualties, instead giving credit to an early warning system that gave troops enough time to get into bunkers and out of harm's way.
The White House address yesterday lasted about 10 minutes, but still included a number of inaccurate or misleading statements. The president tried to blame the Obama administration for Tuesday's Iranian missile attack, suggesting that it helped pay for the weapons used.
The missiles fired last night at us and our allies were paid for with the funds made available by the last administration.
But as the Washington Post fact-checker notes, Trump is stretching the factual evidence to blame the missiles on the deal negotiated by the Obama administration. Experts say such a claim is far-fetched, and the intelligence tying Iran and the Iran deal money directly to the missiles is highly unlikely. Former Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice yesterday slammed Trump for those claims.
This is another series of despicable lies by President Trump. The fact that 3.5 years after taking office, he remains, or 3 years after taking office, he remains obsessed with President Obama just shows President Trump's extreme weakness and insecurity. The facts about the Iran nuclear deal are that it effectively halted and rolled back Iran's nuclear program.
Now, Trump also said that Iran's provocations have only increased since it signed onto the nuclear deal.
Iran's hostilities substantially increased after the foolish Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2013. And they were given $150 billion, not to mention $1.8 billion in cash.
Not only did Trump inaccurately state the deal was signed in 2013 rather than 2015, the New York Times notes the agreement did not directly provide American money to Iran, but it did release about $100 billion in previously frozen Iranian assets. A separate $1.7 billion transfer of cash to Iran was to settle a decades-long dispute and was agreed to in negotiations that happened parallel to the nuclear deal. It's also worth noting that Trump, despite years of diminishing the importance of NATO, requested that the alliance play a more prominent role in the Middle East. According to a White House readout, he made such a request directly yesterday in a call to Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg.
The civilized world must send a clear and unified message to the Iranian regime. Your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. It will not be allowed.
The American people safe, achieve de-escalation with Iran, and ensure stability in the region. The speaker also stated that Congress's concerns were not addressed by the president's insufficient War Powers Act notification and by the administration's briefing. In her statement, Pelosi indicated that 2 other resolutions may also be voted on. One would repeal a 2002 measure authorizing U.S. forces in Iraq, and another would bar funding for military action against Iran without specific congressional approval. Joining us now from Washington, D.C., White House reporter for Axios, Elena Trine. Elena, great to have you with us this morning, as always. What is President Trump's decision to not escalate the military conflict with Iran mean for the administration's next steps in the region, you think?
So the president clearly was taking his foot off the gas in that live address to the nation yesterday. And shortly after his statement, people within the administration had begun already pointing to that and pointing to the response from Iran following the attack last week as a big de-escalation effort, and saying that, look, we're not going into a military war with Iran. There was an imminent threat posed by General Soleimani that we had taken care of, and that looking forward, the situation there is not going to be enough that we're heading into war. And so it was an appropriate attack. Of course, people in Congress, people on the Hill disagree with that, Republicans and Democrats included. They argue that this was not, they still do not have enough information to show that General Soleimani did pose an imminent threat as they claim. And so a lot of people still aren't buying that argument, but they are pointing to the de-escalation now. And like I said, the president pulling his foot off the gas and showing that he really doesn't want a military war with Iran as justification moving forward.
So, Elena, let's stick with that for a moment. As you were bringing up some senators and members of the Republican Party, their dissatisfaction with the intel briefing with regards to the reasons in which they decided to kill General Soleimani. Some Republican senators were heard calling this insulting, the intel briefing. Could this benefit the Democrats' push here to rein in the president's war powers?
Oh, completely. And we've already seen people, I've spoken with a ton of Democrats on the Hill, and including several people on Nancy Pelosi's, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's team about this. And they say, look, people like Senator Mike Lee, one of the president's fiercest defenders, came out giving really a stunning rebuke of the Trump administration's top intelligence officials of that briefing yesterday, calling it probably the worst military briefing he's ever received, and saying that they do not have enough information. And remember, these briefings that they were given, both the House and the Senate, were in a classified setting in a SCIF with members of Congress. And so they're saying we needed way more information to justify this incredible action on the part of the administration, and they don't believe they got that. And so Speaker Pelosi, as well as several other Democrats, are saying even Republicans, these defenders of the president, are saying that they don't have enough information to justify the attack, and giving them what they think is the justification to move forward with that resolution.
I got to say, it was stunning to hear Senator Mike Lee voice his dissatisfaction with that intel briefing. As someone who does not often do that sort of thing.
We're going to have that soundbite from Mike Lee coming up. Meanwhile, according to the Washington Post, there is a turf war raging behind the scenes among congressional Republicans over who should defend the president in the upcoming trial. Among those under consideration are some of Trump's most aggressive defenders, such as Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, John Ratcliffe, Mike Johnson, and Doug Collins. Also under consideration for the legal team is Alan Dershowitz, a White House official, however, cautions no final decisions have been made. And could this now be the next season of The Apprentice? Find out who gets to represent.
Dun, dun, dun. Is that the,
Finds
was that
out,
the
yeah,
music?
it was supposed to be a music, but there was no music. You know,
You were fired.
Yeah.
Hey, Danny.
Good
Joining us here
Danny
on set,
Savalas.
MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalas, to break down and judge for us the attorneys that have been chosen by the president for his defense
Should we
team
do it by public
in the
voting like the
impending
NBA
Senate
All-Star, All-Star style?
Not a bad idea.
It's got to have a little flair to this thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting selection, but no surprises insofar as White House counsel represents the president at impeachment. It happened during the Clinton impeachment. No surprise to see Jay Sekulow. He is an effective communicator and a very experienced, accomplished attorney. Now we get into the attorney that I would love to see for the show of it, but probably not someone that Trump should add, and that's Rudy Giuliani. I would absolutely love to see him on the Senate floor doing what Rudy does. But we're not going to see that. Even if President Trump makes an impulsive decision, it won't be to add Rudy Giuliani.
He'll serve as an advisory role in some way, shape, or form, you think, though?
Maybe, but I don't know that Trump needs it. He's going to have a pretty solid legal team anyway. Alan Dershowitz is an intriguing choice. He wrote an entire book for the constitutional reason that President Trump should not be impeached. So he is a constitutional scholar. He would be a very interesting addition to the team. But now we get into the House members that are being considered for being to be added to the legal team. And the real answer to whether or not to add folks like Jim Jordan or John Ratcliffe is, what are the president's goals? If he wants a great show that'll really appeal to his base, then he should add them. They are very effective advocates in that they know the case inside and out. And that is one of the most important things to have in any trial, is somebody who knows the facts inside and out. But on the other hand, if you want to win, then your audience is a very limited audience. It is senators like Susan Collins, moderates who could go either way. And if you want to avoid irritating them with the show of House members, House Republicans arguing fervently on the Senate floor, then maybe that isn't the best choice for this particular
I'm getting
trial.
a sense, though, the president is going to want some fireworks and all this, and Jim Jordan certainly set off some fireworks in some of that House testimony.
Well, this is, at the end of the day, a televised event, meaning the American public will be able to see this. And joking aside, regardless of whether or not, as you say, it is just for the 3 votes or 4 votes that may go one way or the other, they are going into an election season, and this impeachment and this trial will certainly define this upcoming year, regardless of how it plays out. It's going to be on TV for hundreds of millions of Americans to see.
And more we are realizing as viewers that really being an effective trial attorney isn't a skill that you necessarily need in impeachment. It is such a political process. It is one of oration, of speeches. There's very little cross-examination of actual witnesses that's going to go on. So considering adding folks like Jim Jordan, who have been such effective advocates for President Trump, may continue to be a good decision for the Trump legal team.
Someone who's known to the people.
Yes, exactly. Someone who the people.
We'll find out who gets the rose next week.
You didn't get a call? You didn't get a call?
I'm open. I'm open. I'm open.
Danny Savalas, thank you as always.
Danny, thank you.
Let's get a check on your weather now with NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Wild times coming up here. We have a big storm system coming to the middle of the country. We're going to have severe weather. We're going to have tornadoes. We're going to have record highs. We're going to have some ice. We're going to have some snow. This storm's going to have it all, almost like a March-like storm, too. And it's going to feel like it in many areas. So this morning, we had those snow squalls go through the Northeast yesterday. Now it's just cold. And I'm not going to say cold a lot in the next 5 to 10 days. This is it. This is as cold as it's going to get. We're already starting to warm up in St. Louis at 43 in Omaha. Notice that we're in the teens in the Great Lakes, single digits, and even some negative numbers in northern New England. So it is a very chilly morning, but it won't last long. So for today, no real problems in the southeast. We warm up a little bit this afternoon in the areas of the northeast, but you notice we start to get some late day thunderstorms in Texas. Today's not the real big problem. Tomorrow is. We have a chance of even a severe weather outbreak Friday into Saturday. 28 million people at risk. The storms will form tomorrow, Dallas to Austin and San Antonio, and then those storms will head through Houston, through Louisiana, Arkansas also. And then by the time we get to Saturday, those storms continue to roll through the south from New Orleans to Birmingham to Montgomery, and eventually late Saturday heading into areas like North Georgia. And besides that, we have a flash flood watch for about 5 million people in areas of the northern Ohio Valley, including St. Louis and the Midwest. And that's where we could get significant rainfall. And guys, on top of all that, some areas will even get some heavy snow out of this on Saturday, possibly north of Chicago, Milwaukee could get up to 9 to 12 inches, and our friends in Kansas City too. So this storm's going to have it all, and we'll set dozens.
Senior members of the royal family. The couple made the announcement in a post on Instagram yesterday, writing in part this: after many months of reflection and internal discussions, we have chosen to make a transition this year and starting to carve out a progressive new role within the institution. We intend to step back as senior members of the royal family and work to become financially independent while continuing to fully support Her Majesty the Queen Harry and Meghan go on to say that they will split their time between the UK and North America in order to raise their son Archie, quote, with an appreciation for royal tradition while providing the family space to focus on their next chapter. Buckingham Palace responded to the surprise announcement in a statement, writing this: discussions with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are at an early stage. We understand their desire to take a different approach, but these are complicated issues that will take time to work through. The decision comes after the royal couple, who has been intensely scrutinized in British tabloids, discussed in a recent documentary the pressures they have been facing, as well as family rifts. Over the holidays, they took an extended break from royal duties, spending Christmas in Canada.
And joining us now over the phone from London, NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons. Keir, good to have you with us. This is a pretty significant story for a lot of people who follow the royals, but there's a lot of important messaging behind it as well. Do we know how the royal family is responding to this news? And what are you hearing in London from a public reaction point of view? What does the ordinary public think about these iconic figures deciding to step back a little bit from royal life?
Hey, Eamon. Well, I'm actually on the phone because I'm on my way to Windsor Castle. It is significant. Look, frankly, the royal family haven't seen a split like this since Princess Diana. There's no coincidence, of course, Harry being Princess Diana's son. We know how much he's trying to walk in her footsteps. Frankly, I think he's trying to live her life in a sense. And you can see in the statement from Harry and Meghan, the same kind of critical eye about the royal family that Princess Diana had in Harry's own mind. You know, guys, we've spoken off-air in the past about, just how divided the royal family has become in recent years. The rift between Harry and William, frankly, this is it all laid out. There are massive questions, and I do think it's not too much to describe this as a crisis for the royal family, frankly, because you've got to remember that Harry is the second most popular member of the royals, next to the Queen. For the royal family to be losing this couple, this star couple, these global icons they've become, in this way, is potentially seriously damaging. And the questions are huge. Let me just give you one, just to describe, how do we do that? How do they do this? The issues involved. Who's going to provide protection for this couple? Is the British taxpayer going to provide that, even while they're living overseas for some of the time? And remember that Princess Diana, after her split from the royal family, no longer had royal protection. And we know some years after that, she was involved in that fatal car crash. And there were those who said that if she had had royal protection, that might not have happened. So that statement from Buckingham Palace in response was stone cold, wasn't it? And but at the same time, when they say there's lots of issues to be figured out, there really are.
Yeah, I think, Keir Simmons, thank you very much for that report. I was going to say really quickly, I think it's surprising how quickly it came out into the open, because we had been hearing about this. The royal family is very guarded. Usually you don't see this kind of rift, but the fact that they came out with their statement on social media and then the palace responded with their own statement saying this thing still needs to be worked out is very telling.
I can only wonder how long it's been in the making. As we brought up the docuseries, that Harry and Meghan were pretty forthcoming with regards to their lifestyles and the difficulties that they face. And it was incredibly refreshing to hear from Meghan speak so honestly, really, about the pressures of being a mother, a new mother, under the spotlight, and being within the royal family and the responsibilities that she holds. So we'll have to wait and see
we certainly wish
how
them
this
the best
develops.
to both of them as they go forward.
All of this.
Still ahead, we continue to follow the very latest on the U.S.-Iran conflict. President Trump is stepping away from new military action, but he is vowing increased sanctions. We're going to get a live report from Tehran next.
Plus, two Republicans.
Now, the U.S. opting to respond to the attacks aimed at U.S. forces in Iraq with economic sanctions and not military force. The president saying yesterday that Iran appears to be standing down. For the very latest on all this, we go to NBC News Tehran Bureau Chief Ali Arouzi in Tehran. Ali, great to have you with us on this Thursday morning, our time, afternoon, yours. The president, as we said, is framing this as Iran backing down in the face of the U.S. He told the Americans they should be very happy that nobody was injured or hurt or killed in the attack on Al Ain Air Base. What are you hearing in Tehran this morning? How is the Iranian government there reacting to the developments of the last couple of hours?
Hey, Eamon, good to be with you. Well, look, there's still a lot of tough talk coming out of Tehran. The man that replaced Soleimani, General Ghani, made a statement today saying that he's going to strongly follow Soleimani's path and that those rocket attacks are the negotiating table. And I think Iran is going to pursue its course of fighting America in the shadows through proxies, through cyber attacks, which is where they are more comfortable fighting America. That's where their expertise lies, in asymmetrical warfare, in proxy attacks, in cyber attacks. So the status quo is the same. I think we revert to pre-Soleimani killing times, and that's the course Iran is going to follow. Interestingly also, Eamon, I was going through a lot of Iranian social media here, and there were a lot of comments here by Iranians in Iran that this wasn't really retaliation for Qasem Soleimani's killing. This wasn't an eye for an eye because Iran lost its top general, arguably the second most important man in the country, the guy that had designed all of these militias and Iran's strategy in this area, and America didn't really suffer any damage.
All right, NBC's Ali Arouzi in Tehran with that update. Fascinating as always, Ali. Thank you so much.
All right, Trump administration officials held 2 classified briefings yesterday on last week's drone strike that killed General Soleimani, and lawmakers came away with vastly different conclusions. Democrats expressed frustration with administration officials. They were joined by 2 Republican senators, Mike Lee of Utah and Rand Paul of Kentucky, who were both sharply critical about what they heard from officials. Watch this.
Probably the worst briefing I've seen, at least on a military issue, in the 9 years I've served in the United States Senate. One of the messages we received from the briefers was, do not debate, do not discuss the issue of the appropriateness of further military intervention against Iran. And that if you do, you'll be emboldening Iran. I find it insulting and I find it demeaning to the Constitution of the United States, to which we've all sworn an oath. And they had to leave after 75 minutes while they're in the process of telling us that we need to be good little boys and girls and run along and not debate this in public. I find that absolutely insane. I walked into that briefing undecided as to whether to support the resolution under the War Powers Act introduced by Senator Kaine. That briefing is what changed my mind. That briefing is what brought me on board, together with the amendments that Senator Kaine has agreed to make. I'm now going to support it.
I joined Senator Lee in making the decision to also support the War Powers Resolution. I wanted to hear the intelligence first. What I hear was less than satisfying. I see no way in the world you could logically argue that an authorization to have war with Saddam Hussein has anything to do with having war with people currently in Iraq.
So in hearing that, Senator Lindsey Graham hit back after Senators Paul and Lee made those comments, arguing they are, quote, empowering the enemy. Senator Lee later responded on Fox News.
I think they're overreacting, quite frankly. Go debate all you want to. I'm going to debate you. Trust me, I'm going to let people know that at this moment in time, to play this game with the War Powers Act, which I think is unconstitutional, is that whether you mean to or not, you're empowering the enemy.
Said you're empowering the enemy.
That is fundamentally antithetical to the Constitution. Look, I love Lindsey Graham. He's a fantastic guy. We worked closely together on a lot of issues. He's dead wrong insofar as he's suggesting that this is playing a game. Mr. Graham, the Constitution of the United States is not a game.
Wow. There is a growing chorus of Senate Democrats who say it is time for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to transmit the articles of impeachment against President Trump to the Senate.
We are reaching the point where the articles of impeachment should be sent.
As if they are at a major political impasse here for both House and Senate leaders with regards to moving forward with these articles of impeachment. Where do the conversations go from here?
Well, like you said, there definitely is an impasse, but I do think that, and I've spoken with a lot of House Democrats as well who have been discussing with Speaker Pelosi what the timing of the transmitting of these articles will look like. And they do recognize that a ton of Senate Democrats are pushing her to send the articles sooner rather than later, and to get so that they can begin the Senate trial. Again, though, and I've spoken with a ton of people on Pelosi's team, and they say, listen, she still is standing by what she said even prior to the holiday recess was, we need to see exactly what the Senate rules will look like, exactly what the arena, the word that she keeps using, will look like for a trial before she can name House managers. I've also spoken with people close to McConnell who said, listen, or to Leader McConnell, he's not really planning to lay out totally specifically what this will look like. He thinks that he's been very clear, especially in his statement that he made earlier this week, that they will move forward without negotiating with Democrats to move forward on a vote to establish the rules for the trial, really going back to the Clinton precedent that was set in 99. And so they both are disagreeing on what these rules and what the details look like. And it's unclear, really, what the Speaker needs to see before she's ready to send them.
Hey, Elena, let's talk about another big development on Capitol Hill yesterday. What do you make of the Republicans' varied reactions over yesterday's briefing on Iran? We knew that by some accounts, the intelligence had been razor thin. Now we're hearing some of these accounts by folks like Rand Paul and Mike Lee, the senators. They're pretty much breaking ranks with the Republican talking points.
Right. I have to say, I very much appreciate Senator Mike Lee and Senator Rand Paul for saying this so colorfully and publicly. A lot of times, reporters, we struggle on the Hill because you hear these rebukes of the president and others as, you know, behind the scenes or on background. And I appreciate that they came out forwardly and on the record made these statements. But again, we did see people like Senator Lindsey Graham calling Senator Mike Lee's comments as, you know,
good news all around, but especially for Iran's economy. For more on that part of this story, we turn to CNBC's Willem Marx in London. Willem, good to have you with us. Walk us through some of the numbers that you've been following in this crisis.
Well, I mean, you know, it may be good news in terms of there not being any further military action, but it's important to note that President Trump did say he would like to impose fresh economic sanctions on Iran. Their economy has always been struggling the last decade or so, but particularly the last 18 months because of this policy of maximum pressure from the Trump administration that involves economic sanctions. It's had a massive impact on their ability to generate revenue from oil. So if we look at the actual production and the export of Iranian crude oil over the last year or so, the predictions for this year, they've fallen very, very steeply. That's important because that's where a lot of their budget comes from when they want to spend money on government services. So although they are spending more money on government services and their revenues are under huge amounts of pressure, that disparity means they're having to borrow more money. And as they keep borrowing, that loan from the international community, from banks, wherever it comes from, gets more and more expensive as well. So they're servicing a lot of debt at the moment as they expand that difference between spending and revenue. Another big business story in the region that we've been talking about the last few days, of course, has been the mysterious arrival in Beirut of Carlos Ghosn, the former CEO of Renault. He arrived from Tokyo, where he seemed to mysteriously escape from house arrest. He's a man that carries Brazilian, French, Lebanese passports. They were confiscated when he was arrested. He was allowed to hold on to one of them as a foreigner in Tokyo, and he seems to have used that to enter Lebanon. He gave a long-awaited press conference, his first public comment since he was ousted as Renault's CEO. And at that press conference, he said that despite appearances, he did not consider himself a legal fugitive.
It is important for me to emphasize that I'm not above the law, and I welcome the opportunity for the truth.
But this is in the right point. The other thing is, if we do get out, you know, we've spent a tremendous amount of money on building airports and building, it's one of the largest embassies we have in the world, Mike. And we want to be reimbursed for the various costs that we have had, and they're very significant. But we'll work something out. And I talk sanctions, but I'm only talking sanctions if we're not treated with respect. We have to be treated with respect. We deserve, I'll tell you what, with what we did, with what, excuse me, wait, 1 second. With what we did with ISIS, and this was done during my administration, because it was a mess before we got here. With what we did with ISIS, we've done the Middle East and we've done a lot of other countries a tremendous favor. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you agree with the Turkish provocations in Libya, in Eastern Mediterranean, against Greece? And are you willing to talk to your friend Erdogan?
We are talking to him, and we're talking to, when you're talking about Libya, we're discussing with President Erdogan. We're discussing with many other countries. I just spoke with the Chancellor of Germany, with Angela, and we talked about that subject specifically, Libya, what's going on. We'll be talking to Russia. They're involved. A lot of countries are involved with respect to Libya, and it's right now a mess. But there are a lot of countries, and they all want to know where we stand, and they do know where we stand. We have a very distinctive stand, and we have meetings set up, and we're going to see if we can work out some kind of a plan for peace.
I think it's important. Mr. President, can I just make one point?